Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. For those who are new here, my name is Samantha and I am a casual YouTuber who loves making EUC and mental health content on the side. I also work as a psychiatrist and I live in Christchurch, New Zealand. Today, I'm on my way to collect some electrical and plastic components for my upcoming mini EUC project. Previously, I made a video about nurturing your inner child with the intention of making another follow-up video about what it means to be a quote-unquote adult. Little did I know that one of my favorite YouTubers and famous authors, Mark Hansen, released a video about this, which was an absolute delight. I enjoy watching Mark's content, and I encourage you to watch that if you haven't already. In it, he touched on various milestones in childhood and adolescence that one has to meet to achieve adulthood, and the different attachment styles. I'm going to expand on what Mark has said, although I secretly wish he would watch my video and comment on it too. In today's video, I will attempt to answer 3 questions. Number 1, what is an adult and how do you identify one? Number 2, what are the things that could potentially delay or prevent adulthood? And number 3, what does it mean to be an adult in today's socio-political and economic climate? A word of warning. I'm going to be touching on some heavy topics today in light of what is going on in the world. Please turn away if you are not in the mood for this. Part 1. What is an adult and how do you identify one? Previously, I mentioned that human societies did not recognize childhood as a distinct phase in life throughout most of human history until the late 17th century, when this began to shift. The cultural shift later spurred further scientific studies on developmental psychology that led to our understanding of child psychology today. In Mark's video, he mentioned several crucial distinctions between a child and an adult, and one of them is the lack of formal operational thinking, or what I call a lack of a theory of mind. In layman's terms, this means that children cannot appreciate another person's point of view because they can't put themselves in other people's shoes. Again, this self-centeredness is a necessary evolutionary adaptation that boosts the child's odds of survival in the wild. They are engineered to be narcissistic, to prioritize their own needs above others. However, this narcissistic tendency tends to abate with time as the child grows into an adult, even though it never goes away completely. The child learns gradually, through repeated disappointments, that the universe doesn't revolve around them. Despite this being a hard pill to swallow, most eventually adapt and learn to live with their own perceived insignificance, which then shifts their focus to something bigger than themselves. This, alongside other traits such as better emotional regulation, problem solving, and planning capabilities, is generally speaking what Mark has referred to as the onset of adulthood. Although this is mostly true, there is something important that Mark didn't mention. As a psychiatrist, it is my job to tell apart these developmental phases so I can tailor treatments differently to individuals depending on how psychologically mature they are. And I have to say that humans are more complicated than they appear. All things being equal, Our ability to think and behave like mature adults depend on how safe we feel at the time. A typical example to consider here is the everyday occurrence of road rage, in which adults behave like spoiled and entitled children just because they're having a bad day. They replace fear with anger and take it out on other road users, which is analogous to the temper tantrums children exhibit when they are hungry. You have also heard stories of soldiers during war who crawled into a hole, curled themselves up in a fetal position, stuck their thumbs in their mouths before calling out for their mummies amidst heavy artillery bombardment. These poor souls are trying to simulate the safety they felt while living in their mother's womb, during which they are curled up and tucked away in a dark, warm, and fluid-cushioned environment, where all their needs are met instantaneously through the umbilical cord without even asking. Depending on how much control we have when faced with a threat, our bodies instinctively react with fight, flight, or freeze, which is also known as the fight, flight, freeze response. In the case of the soldier, he froze because he couldn't compete with artillery shells raining down on him, and neither could he outrun them. However, on another sunny day, he could have been leading his men as their captain and father figure. A person with a secure attachment style is not immune to this reaction, although someone with an insecure attachment style is more likely to regress into a childlike state when in distress. There are also neuroatypical individuals with ADHD, autism, or a combination of both, who suffer from emotional dysregulation, sensory overstimulation, and relational conflicts. And then there are those with significant trauma, like the aforementioned soldier, who might also fail to behave like mature adults due to PTSD and chronically high levels of cortisol. To get around this issue, human societies have traditionally resorted to various initiation rites to signal adulthood. For example, our modern practice of bungee jumping was inspired by a ritual performed by men in southern Vanuatu. These men would jump off wooden towers about 20 to 30 meters high, or 60 to 100 feet high, with tree vines wrapped around their ankles to signal their bravery and masculinity. Those who attempt the jump will be called a man, while those who refuse are deemed cowards or a child. However, in most cultures, women are generally spared from such practices because it is understood that a girl turns into a woman on the day of their periods, which marks their childbearing capacity. Women, therefore, receive clear internal signals from their bodies and external signals from society that mark their transition to adulthood. Unfortunately, that line is not as clear for boys. Some believe a man is not a man until he gets a car or a job. Others say a man is not a man until he gets married or fathers a certain number of children. And then some say a man is someone who must be willing to wage war to protect their country. The stories we tell our boys are endless. It is an understatement to say that their goalposts are shifting all the time. Many of them don't even know what the goalposts look like. And without adequate opportunities to prove one's manhood, some boys are unfortunately left in limbo and without a purpose. Or worse, some of them become radicalized by interest groups. Hence, the idea of an adult has always been problematic to me for 3 reasons. First, the adult tends to be a non-permanent mental state that disappears when in distress. Second, what constitutes an adult changes across time and cultures, especially for men. And third, the story we tell ourselves about adulthood could be propaganda designed by society to manipulate us into conformity. Although this works fine for most people, many do not conform to the classical stages of maturation as we know them. In my opinion, the best way to tell if someone is an adult is to judge them by their appearance and how they make you feel. In general, children are smaller in physical size and more youthful in looks. They do not intimidate, and they bring out your protective instincts. Due to their perceived vulnerability, you might feel tempted to protect them from the world, or in some cases, from yourself, by restraining your vocabulary and gestures around them. Adults, on the other hand, are larger in size and psychologically robust, and this bears out in your interactions with them. Depending on your height and weight relative to them, you might feel safe or intimidated. When speaking to an adult, you can afford to be more candid and straightforward without fear of hurting them, because they can handle a healthy degree of interpersonal conflict without disintegrating or resorting to temper tantrums. There are, of course, exceptions to the rule. Some children appear more mature than their age, while some adults are more childish than others. However, these should always be considered within specific contexts, as we all behave differently depending on the situation. Unless they are being true to themselves, these outward appearances are usually not sustainable over long periods of time. Part 2. What are the things that could delay or prevent adulthood? To keep everything consistent, I will focus on the themes of fear and safety. I distinctly remembered the excitement when I hopped on my Kingsong 18L for the first time around 2.5 years ago. Because I am naturally clumsy and slow to learn, it took me about 4 weeks of practice before I was able to ride it confidently. However, I also took a 2-month hiatus to recover from a fall that injured my tailbone. During that time, I battled my decision to give up because the price of riding an EUC seemed too steep. On one hand, giving up feels like the easiest and safest option, but on the other, it also feels like a tremendous loss to give up what little progress I have made. I then started binge watching YouTube videos, especially those from Mr. Adam Wrongway, to keep me inspired and motivated. And one day, with a lot of luck and persistence, I found myself riding the EUC for the first time, even though I was still trembling. And the rest is history. My little story encapsulates the typical journey a child takes towards adulthood. Their journey usually begins with a sense of wonder, innocence, and imagination before they are struck down by a cruel and indifferent universe. They then retreat to safety to lick their wounds, and crucially, to regain their courage by latching on to their role models and fairy tales. The journey is treacherous and often lonely. Although their parents can offer external support, the child has to internalize a parental figure to motivate them internally. Through this journey, they learn to push their limits, endure pain, and retreat when necessary. But there is also an element of luck that affects their odds of succeeding. Some are lucky to come out the other side as polished adults, while others end up broken and jaded. Before embarking on this journey, every child has to weigh up the risks and benefits of becoming an adult. If subjected to overwhelming adversity, the child may perceive the world as too dangerous and lose the incentive to grow up. They also lose hope when constantly exposed to adult figures who appear lost, disempowered, and miserable. A child needs a healthy adult role model who is genuinely happy being an adult, because they need to believe that there is something good in store for them in the future. Only then will they be inspired to grow into an adult. Remember, trauma alone does not stunt development. It is the loss of hope that seals the coffin. Part 3. What does it mean to be an adult in today's sociopolitical and economic climate? Oh boy, you have no idea how many times I've altered this script due to breaking news. You don't need me to remind you that we are currently living through one of the most uncertain times in human history. There is growing unrest around the world due to wars, economic crises, environmental disasters, and growing authoritarianism. At the moment of writing this, it is said that at least 2,000 protesters have died in Iran, and there is now unrest in Minnesota after a Minnesotan woman unfortunately perished following an encounter with immigration officers. Many ignore the bad news to safeguard their sanity, but we also risk sacrificing our humanity when we turn a blind eye to others' suffering. Yet, the atrocities and injustices around the world are becoming increasingly hard to ignore, even though knowing more doesn't improve the situation. To the Iranians and Minnesotans, I express my heartfelt sympathy during these times, and I applaud your courage in standing up to an oppressive government. For those who don't know, Christchurch, New Zealand was the site of 2 consecutive mass shootings on March 15, 2019, whereby 51 Muslim community members were gunned down by a foreign white supremacist. While working as a psychiatrist in Christchurch during that time, I treated many who were affected by it. However, I was also deeply affected on a personal level. There was an outpouring of love and solidarity, followed by an immediate ban on assault rifles by our politicians. Our beloved Prime Minister at the time, Dame Jacinda Ardern, championed the idea of kindness while our community banded together. Today, many of us still observe a moment of silence every March 15th to commemorate the fallen. We continue to fight racism, xenophobia, and Islamophobia, both locally and internationally. And then, in an ultimate act of grace, family members of the fallen have come forth to say they have forgiven the shooter. My friends, this is the best model of how a grown-up should behave in times of crisis that I know of. I will not advocate for pacifism because I believe in our right to defend ourselves. But in the midst of the chaos, we must not lose sight of hope, kindness, and above all, our shared humanity. Everything else beyond that is just details. I shall leave you with a moving scene from The Lord of the Rings. Nobody embodies the journey from child to adult better than these little hobbits.
I can't do this, Sam. I know. It's all wrong. By rights, we shouldn't even be here. But we are. It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo. The ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end. Because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing. This shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come. And when the sun shines, it'll shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you. That meant something. Even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Frodo, I do understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. They kept going. Because they were holding on to something. What are we holding on to, Sam? There's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo. And it's worth fighting for.
Thank you for sticking with me till the end. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. Please leave your thoughts and questions in a comment section. I read all of them. And last but not least, stay strong, ride safe out there. Take care.